Hi guys, this is Mr. Mitchell here. Welcome to my instructional video on the process for the step stool. Since I have a brief video, I'm just going to show a portion of it to show you some of the essential techniques that we're going to use when we're making our step stool here. So I've gone ahead and prepared some of the components, but I'm still going to show you some of the essential techniques and skills that you're going to need to complete this project. As always, safety first. I'm wearing protective eyeglasses here, and I'm going to make sure that I follow all required safety procedures for the different equipment that I'm using here. So if you'll see, I've gone ahead and I've just prefabbed some rails here for the top of the step stool, and then the boards for the surface of the surface of the step stool itself. So what I did was I routed all my edges. I did a layout and I pre-drilled and countersunk for my fasteners to go into the rails so that I can plug those afterwards, sand them up nice and smooth, and then I'll have a nice smooth surface on the step stool. On the outside, I marked out a radius using a template, and then I cut it with a jigsaw on both sides so that once we assemble the top, when we get to the outside edges, we just have a nice round appearance there. I left off one on the other side so that I could show you some of the techniques that I used. So I'm going to put these aside for now, just until I prep that last board for the top of the step stool. So you can see this one, I've done the radius here on the outside corner, but I left one off. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out that radius, and this is a 3.5 inch board. So ideally the radius should be 1 3/4. Now I'm just going to use something for a template because that'll make it a lot faster, something that was aesthetically appealing, and this roll of electrical tape actually worked really well to get a nice radius, so that's what I used. Now that I've laid out that radius that I want to cut on my board, what I'm going to do is secure it to my table before I use the jigsaw so that I'm free to have two hands for operation of my jigsaw, keep things nice and safe. When I put my quick clamps on, again, I'm going to face the bar portion of them down for safety purposes. It prevents any possible chance of me tripping or stumbling onto them and potentially falling, getting one of these in the eye or in the face. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up quickly. Now my jigsaw, I just want to inspect, check that blade, make sure it's nice and safe, nice and sharp, because we always want to be cutting with sharp tools because it's a lot safer than cutting with something that's duller. Inspecting my cord, make sure it's in good shape, there's no cuts in it or exposed wire that could potentially cause an electrical hazard. I'm going to plug that in. Now cutting with the jigsaw, standard cutting practices for any power cutting tool. I don't want to have my blade up against my work when I start initiating the cut, because it could give me the potential for kickback. I want to always use two-hand operation, keep my hands away from the bottom side of my work or anywhere where they could potentially be in the path of the blade. I'm going to have a nice stable body position, two-hand operation. I'm going to proceed. I'll start the blade motion, and then I'm just going to cut that radius very smoothly. Not applying too much force, but letting the blade itself do the cutting. So here I go. Again, before I set the tool down, I want to make sure the blade has come to a complete stop. That's the only cut I'm making with this. So I'm going to go ahead right now and unplug it, just for added safety, so it doesn't accidentally get the trigger depressed and start wanting to cut on its own. So the jigsaw gives us a fairly clean cut. But just for the sake of the router, I think I'm going to use a orbital sander, and I'm just going to fair that curve out a little bit just to stop any of those ridges from stopping or inhibiting the router from creating a nice smooth path there. I'm going to keep it clamped because that's safe, then I can use two-handed operation of my orbital sander. That'll give me a little bit more of a nice rounded edge for operating that bearing on the router. Again, anytime when I'm clearing wood shavings or chips or anything, it's always a good idea to use a brush instead of using your hand, because if there is something sharp there, then you don't have to worry about potentially getting a sliver or an injury. So my router, I've already set up. If you saw my router safety video, which you have, you'll know that I want to go over my tool first, check that it's in good working condition, make sure I have the right bit that I want in there, and then adjust the height of that. I've already done that just for the sake of the video, because we have a limited amount of time that I can film and upload. So I plugged in my router. I want to make sure, two-handed operation. I want to keep my hands free and clear of the cutting implement itself. I want to keep this aperture pointed away from me so I'm not firing projectiles or small pieces of wood debris at myself. I'm going to put my base down nice and stable, turn on the router, then I'm going to initiate the cut, go nice and slowly around that radius, and when I'm done, I can give it a nice little sanding there and just kind of tune it up a little bit. So base down, two-handed operation. Once I'm done the shaping, I'm going to make sure that the router comes to a complete stop before I set it down. Like I did with the jigsaw, I'm going to go ahead and unplug it so it doesn't accidentally get turned on and cause a kind of risk. I'm going to use my palm sander just to clean that up a little bit. It's soft wood, so it has a tendency to burn. So I got a pretty fair curve radius on the corner. Looks all right, good enough for the step stool. I'm gonna go ahead and start assembling now. I'm gonna set my rails here. Set my first board in place, line things up. I'm gonna go ahead and put in 2 fasteners, screws, and I'm gonna square up those rails so that everything is nice and square when I'm complete. Putting in a couple screws to sort of get a little bit of a fit up happening is always a decent practice, so that I can go check between each step to make sure that everything's square and true. Two-handed operation on my drill. And I just want to snug that up. I want to make sure that I don't overdrive it and strip out the softwood rail that I fabricated there. So if you'll see, the torque from that screw sort of made my rails out of square. That's an easy enough fix since I only put 1 screw in each of them. If I put 2 screws in, now I'd be in a little bit more trouble. I'd have to pull those screws. I'm just going to use my pivotal square and adjust that rail so it's nice and square with the first board that I put on for the top of the step stool. Okay, now I got 2 square. I can go ahead and add my middle board. Keeping about an 1/8 inch spacing in between each of them. Nice thing about pre-drilling for all my screws is I'm not in any position where I have to hold the screw where I could potentially injure myself through slipping and hitting my fingertips with the drill bit. Just going to adjust this a little bit. Make sure my gap is nice and parallel. Okay. I'm gonna add a couple more screws here. Then I just want to show you an example of how I'm gonna plug these countersink holes after I'm done fastening. So there, I got my top assembled here. Now I'm going to show you the process for plugging this. So I have my cordless drill and I have a plug cutter here, which I'm locking out that trigger just so that when I'm installing the bit itself, that plug cutter, that I don't accidentally depress the trigger and cut my fingers. You always want to adjust these keyless chucks with our hands. Don't adjust them by holding the chuck and depressing the trigger. So now I'm going to take a little small piece of pine here. I'm going to secure it so my bit doesn't bind in there, causing me unnecessary grief and potential risk of injury. Got my clamps there. Again, 2 hands, and I'm going to allow this cutter to do the work. I don't want to apply any real force here. I want to let the sharpened portion of the tool do the work. So I'm slowly going to initiate my cut here. Remove it, put that tool aside. Now I just want to break out that plug from the block that I cut it from. So I can use it in my new piece of work. So here I have my plug. What I'm going to do is put a little bit of wood glue on it. Good practice in carpentry is to always apply glue to both mating parts of an assembly. I'm going to line up the grain with the grain on the board, and I'm just going to give it a few taps here to drive it in. Once I got that in place, typically I would wait at least maybe a half an hour to let that glue kind of tack up a little bit, but since we're pressed for time here, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. Tool I have here is my cordless oscillating multi-tool. I'm going to put that battery, check my blade condition, it's okay. Now what I want to do is just hold it flush against my top, but before I proceed I'm going to put some clamps on here. Always want to secure your workpiece. You don't have to worry about it moving around on you and getting dicey when you're working. Two-handed operation again. I'm going to put it in place where I want to initiate the cut and then depress the trigger and allow the tool to do the cutting for me. I don't want to put too much force. Cut that close to flush. Now I'm just going to let my orbital sander do the rest of the work here. Take my clamps off, and if you see here, now I have a nice flush surface instead of my pre-drilled hole showing that fastener head in there. So there we have the top of the step stool. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys learned something.